Alright, so our first article is Principles of Instruction, which is by Barak Rosenshines. Presumably you can see me. So the reason we picked this is I read this first issue of Research Ed, and there were a number of mentions of the article throughout. So that's why we're doing it. Basically, as you read, just so you know, it took me 25 minutes when I read it in kind of the most precise and orderly way I could. So I sort of read every single word, including the references, to get an idea of how long it should take. So this is my estimate. It should take you about 25 minutes. As you read, there are three things in particular I want you to keep in the front of your mind. So basically, it's going to tell you 10 principles of good instruction, what good teachers do, and give you examples of each. So the first thing I want you to do is think about, as you read, which one of these 10 is a personal strength of yours or something you're proud of. Which one is one area for you to improve upon? So this would be one of the 10. The more honest you can be, the better, I guess, as we're trying to share practice and discuss how we do things. And then the third thing is I want you to add one strategy to add to a principle. So, like I said, there's 10 principles to go through, that he will take you through rather, and each one is given sort of a reasoning, an explanation, and then some examples from practice or ways to approach it. So what I want you to do is pick one, and it could be different to your strength and your weakness area. It could just be something that maybe you think your practice really neatly addresses, or your subject area, for example, neatly addresses. And then you're basically doing something additive. So what strategy can you add to which of the principles, which can be those or not those, depending on what you prefer. So if you haven't already, post a little introductory video so people know who you are, where you're from, and what your background is before we do the actual meeting. And then, start reading this article. Keep these three things in mind, but also just annotate or read and take notes, whatever notes occur to you as you go through it. Lovely. Of the 10 principles provided in the article, which of these do you think is most a strength of yours within your own teaching practice, and explain why?
Out of the 10 principles mentioned in the article, I would say scaffolding is my area of strength. When I look at my students' results across the years, it's when I've kind of used scaffolding, and I've used it more and more, that my students' results have improved. And as well as that modelling answers on the board. I would say that's my personal strength.
I would say that I've really come a long way in requiring and monitoring independent practice since I started flipping my classrooms. Does take a lot of guiding and modelling, number 5, and scaffolding, which is number 8. But I think given whether it's an in-flip or an out-flip, a lot of my students really have to lift their game and how much they are pacing themselves and all those kinds of things.
Strength I've got there is the number 6. We're checking student understanding in each point. We do that through a variety of sources, a variety of different ways, but we seem to do it consistently. Cheers.
Just adding to that, I think that that's really an area that digital technologies have enhanced our practice in, is being able to do those quick moments of feedback for all students at several points of time. The difference between doing that digitally and with pen and paper, I think, has really made a big difference to teachers' practice.
So my strength, I was going to say scaffolding, but Nate beat me to it, which makes me think that perhaps content areas have particular strengths which all teachers within that discipline hold. I'd love to see if you agree or disagree, but I'm going to go with modelling and worked examples. So rather than providing exemplars, worked examples is kind of working it out and describing the metacognition as you go.
Out of that article, that list of 10, I think my personal strength is the worked examples and providing models. And maybe it is a disciplinary thing because that's a very English teachery thing to do. I was always pretty good at the worked examples, but something I'm stronger at now is providing lots of different models. So students aren't just seeing how brilliant me does it, but lots of different ways that aren't how I would do it too.
Okay, so one of my strengths is number 9, the guiding of independent work. I've been observed that that's kind of where I seem to be in a lot of my lessons by other teachers. It also, I think it's important because you have a pen and you can go around and actually give feedback, like written feedback to students. And it's also an opportunity for the quieter ones, the kids anyway, to have an opportunity to have a discussion with you about what their understanding is and kind of probe them. So I really like that aspect.
So I think my personal strength is the starting each lesson with a bit of a review. So number one, straight off the bat, I was like, boom. I read the rest of the article, but that's where I think I'm all right at. We work really hard on having a bit of retrieval practice at the beginning of our lessons. We run a flip model, so we go, boom, retrieval practice, question from last night, question from a week ago, question from about 6 months ago. And that's where I think I do all right. I think that's a strength of mine.
Hi, I think my strength, and I'm not very good at articulating my strengths, would probably be number one, beginning a lesson with a short review of previous learning. Flipping my classroom means that I need to have my students check in, and so at the start of every lesson we have structure strips, which are structured questions that review the content from the previous night's episodes. So I think I do that all right, and the kids really, really enjoy doing their structure strips. So, yep, number one for me.
So for me, one of my strengths is principle number 4, which was providing models. I think that comes about because of my teaching maths, especially in the past few years, something I still need to work on, but it's one of my strengths because we're constantly having to provide models to show students what they need to, be able to do and learn.
My personal strength would be the daily review. I think that having a recap at the start of the lesson is a really good way to create structure, and I find that the students really like the routine aspect of knowing that they're coming into the room and the first thing they're going to do is answer a question or have a little quiz about what they did last lesson.
One of my strengths is the review process that I use. So number one, I start each lesson with asking students if they've had any questions from the video that they watched. I then ask them questions using a random picker, so it's not the same kids every time. And then I review the video. I've also started adding in a retrieval practice activity at the start of each lesson so that they're getting that consistent review going into number 10.
This question is the inverse of the first. Of the 10 principles provided, which one of these is most an area of your own to develop? Explain how you might do this.
I work in Queensland, so given that we are finally catching up to the rest of the world with external exams, what I need to work on is my consistency of using weekly, monthly reviews, which is strategy 10, trying to balance and plan for them in advance rather than just hoping that we do them leading up to the exam. And prepping that spaced practice for our juniors is particularly a big push at the moment, getting them into good habits before they hit senior. I also really like using models, so I kind of want to do more of that in science.
The one strategy I would need to do or continue to work on is the one that requires and monitor independent practice. The requirements there, but I struggle with the monitoring. Are they doing independent practice? So that's probably something I could probably be a little bit more efficient and effective in.
All right, so in terms of weakness or something to work on, I want to agree with Courtney and Steve as well. They're all things that I could have listed as well, but I'm going to go with asks multiple questions. I think as an English teacher, we tend to focus on the writing and the reading, and speaking and listening as the third element are quite often minimised.
Yeah, one of the areas for me that I really want to work on is checking for understanding. I thought the article had a lot of useful strategies that I've already started using, and they've actually worked. So yeah, I found that really helpful, and I think that's a really, really important area. Feedback is so important, not just at the end of assessment tasks, but during learning as well. So I'm going to be looking at that.
The area that I would most like to develop is number 3, which is asking a lot of questions and checking the answers of all students. I'm really good at asking a lot of questions, but I'm that typical teacher that does the teacher crime of asking questions and getting their same favourite 3 students to talk back to them all the time. So I need to work on my strategies for getting everyone answering so I can see everyone's answer.
So areas of improvement, definitely chunking into smaller steps. As an early career teacher, I find myself being really pressed for time and being stressed out about that. And I was reading that article, and it's like the teacher goes around and reteaches. I'm like, that's me. So definitely an area of improvement. But I think it's like driving a car. You've got to learn each step first, and then you work them all together, and eventually you improve.
So an area for me that's not a strength at all times would be the checking for understanding. Too often, like this is not regular practice, but too often if I'm really pushed, like really squished for time, I will lean on the, all right, do we all understand? Nod. All right, let's move on. And I try to avoid it, but every now and then I catch myself sort of when the pressure's on, just that's where we end up.
Area to develop. I'm really good at this. I can tell you what I can't do. What I really need to improve is asking a large amount of questions to check responses for students. So I really need to work on my questioning technique in class. And so I really need to think about planning my questions before class, and rather than sort of doing them on the fly, so that I really sort of get my students doing that higher order thinking and connecting information from previous concepts.
I think for me, the area I'd want to improve most is principle number 3, because that's the one where I do it, but I don't get every student. And then, especially in some of my classes, I want to make sure I get every student. How I do it, I think I've got to start to leverage technology more than I do, and I use it a lot, but I've still got to leverage it a lot more to get a better understanding and better check for understanding of what the students are at, where they're at.
I can definitely find things that I can improve. I think the biggest one on the list out of the 10 principles of instruction would be the weekly and monthly reviews. I find that we feel so short of time that often that gets lost in the programming cycle. So I need to do a lot better at really strategically structuring my program to have that weekly and monthly review cycle happening.
An area that I could improve is number 5, the guiding student practice. Being science, it's a very busy curriculum. And the way that I generally deal with that is going, whoop, here's some theory. Everyone got that? Sweet. Let's go do a prac because that's fun. And we just don't allow the time to do that guided practice, going over things and over things. Something that came out of the article was the idea of overlearning, which I think is something that I should put into my practice.
The article provides strategies for each of the 10 principles. If you were able to, what strategy would you add to the article, and explain how you do it?
I couldn't think of anything specifically to add, but what I would like is a bit more clarity around balancing the, say, presenting new material and actually allowing for enough rehearsal time. So there seemed to be a bit of a contradiction between you've got to spend a lot of time at the board presenting things comprehensively, doing it thoroughly, questioning, guiding, reviewing, all of that kind of stuff, but then don't forget to give them enough rehearsal time. So it was about, can I please have a little bit more information about balancing the whens, the whys, the hows, all of that, I think.
What you're saying, Courtney, definitely resonates with me, because I was wearing my critiquing hat, like as a, someone who reads an academic piece and being like, so where's this research coming from? Both principles coming from the same kind of research study. So that's something I was noticing too, is like, well, what are the class sizes? What are the parameters of the research acquisition, and who are they observing in classrooms and what environments?
Okay, the one strategy I probably would add is to ensure that the teachers build relationships with the teachers. Greet the students as they're walking the door. The simple metric is, did you talk to every student in that class every day? I mean, without good, strong relationships, good learning is difficult to achieve. So that would be the strategy that I would add.
All right, so again, I'm going to agree with Steve and Courtney. A little bit more clarity around balancing each of the principles is something that would have really helped me understand it. As well as with Steve, I would say relationships are really important. But the aspect I think is missing is, not surprisingly, since it's very teacher-focused, is the role of the student. So I would propose strategies involving the students as experts, or providing models, or doing some of the work of the teacher for us.
People have pointed out that it's, quite a teacher-focused list, and it is. And I wonder if it's that word instruction, that's in the title, and whether that, turns people's minds, certainly the authors of this list, towards, a teacher-focused pedagogy. For me, the big thing that was missing was others. So not just the teacher being the only expert in the room, but bringing in other voices to do all of the work on the list too.
Okay, something to add. I do like this whiteboard relay, mainly for revision. I think that would be a great way to incorporate that monthly review without it being like a test per se. And you have curate a whole lot of questions, award different kind of complexities. Students get to pick their own question and you get to give instant feedback. It's been really awesome and really engaging for the students. So I think that'd be a great one to incorporate monthly reviews into.
So I do, I've got a format for the start of each lesson. And so this is like begin each lesson with a review and ask lots of questions. And the format is 3 questions on a PowerPoint, 3 questions, 1 from last night, 1 from a week ago, and 1 or 2 from a month, 3 months ago, something like that. And it's retrieval practice. It's about answering the questions as quickly as they can. They don't keep the answers. They're all about withdrawing the information and making that a bit more automatic. And yeah, that's how we start each lesson to help out that stuff. They write it down.
Hi, the strategy that I would like to see added to this list is retrieval practice. I get my students every week to complete 20 multiple choice questions, 10 from the current content and 10 from previous parts of the course, and so that they are constantly going back and reviewing material and trying to get that information into their long-term memory. So retrieval practice for me.
I think I would actually agree with Courtney on this, is that balancing aspect was interesting, because I was reading it and it was a bit hard to understand how you can do all of that in one go. But my thought was also thinking about some of that cognitive load aspect when you've got a range of different ability levels in your classroom. How do you manage that, and what's some strategies to manage that across, a real big range of levels of students?
I don't necessarily think it's adding something. I think it's extending perhaps on one of the principles of the independent practice. I'd probably add to that principle that maybe an element of collaboration amongst students, with them practicing their new skills and their new content knowledge together to then develop that.
I don't know if this is really adding anything, because I'm one of these less effective teachers that doesn't spend too much time explaining, but then goes around the class and asks questions. So maybe for the more effective teachers, in your 17 minutes that you've got for the students to work, when you do need to explain something, facilitating that collegiality. So going, oh, well, the person next to you, can they explain it to you? And then listening to that, so that in future, maybe they're asking the people next to them, and the people next to them are actually explaining it, getting a better idea of it.